What's happening, Sandbox Gamers? My name is Leuname and welcome back to RAD. Last episode, you may remember that we started on a castle for the Superman and I to live in during the rest of the RAD series. And we managed to get quite a bit of progress done. We got the towers finished and we got a good start on the walls. And this episode, we're going to finish up the walls entirely and then get a head start on the main building. Now before we get into the building, I do want to point out that I did change the look of the roofs on the towers again. I did that because I still wasn't quite satisfied with how the roofs looked. Like I said, I'm almost never satisfied with roofs, so I reworked the design again, and there's a chance you might see it change again before the next episode. But for now, that's the look of the roofs here, and I actually like the way these look. And with all that said, it's time to get out there and start placing some blocks. To start things off, I decided to actually rework the sample wall a little bit because I was experimenting with different ideas in a different world just to help hone my building skills. And I actually came across a design for the wall that I actually thought looked better in hindsight, so I decided to use that idea for the wall in this build, and basically it was me taking the crenellations, adding a block between them, and then adding the step underneath. So once I made the adjustments I wanted on the sample wall, I came over to this section here and I began construction of this section of the wall. And for the most part, I tried to repeat the pattern that I had set in the sample wall, and I was going to try to repeat that as best as I could for every wall for the rest of the build. Obviously there's going to be some differences because I think every single one of these walls are different sizes. As a reminder, I am building this thing entirely in survival, which is why you'll see me fall off the wall a few times and hurt myself constantly throughout the build. Once that section was done, I came over to this section, which is where I was going to have the main gate to get into the castle grounds. I wanted to have a little bit of an arch look to it, which gave me a bit of an issue because that meant I had to build a walkway also in an arch, while also making sure I had enough room for the walkways above. Other than the opening, this section of the build stayed pretty much the same, adding the crenellations here to give it a bit more variation and a bit more depth. And also adding the little pillars here. The only real difference was I had to actually connect the pillar in the middle because obviously I couldn't have it go straight down to the ground, otherwise that blocked part of the gateway. And I also need to make sure I repeated what I did on the other side. Once the gate side was done, I came over to this side, and there's really not a whole lot to talk about here. Again, I just tried to repeat the pattern as I did for the rest of the wall. Luckily, this ended up being the easiest part because there were no gateways or turns to interfere with the pattern. Oh, look at that. It looks like a pig actually lost his way and ended up in our castle. Hopefully he leaves before too long. Now I do want to point out that after I finished this section of the wall, I did get a bit tired mentally, so I took a break from building, and then when I came back to it later, you'll see it in a minute, somehow the perspectives change. When I came back from the break and started building again, I don't know how I managed to do this, but you might be able to see that now the person building it is actually me. That's actually me down there. And I'm going to be honest, I have no idea how I managed to do this because I've tried setting up to actually have it so it will build from my perspective, but every time I tried, I ended up having to do the recording portion and have to build with the Super Ant's body. But somehow, when I came back from the break and started building again, for some reason it now started recording from the Super Ant's perspective. And I'm glad for that, because now it actually looks like I'm actually doing the building. But I couldn't tell you how I managed to set this up, because honestly, I have no clue. And once that section was done, we came to the part that I really dreaded having to build, because of the fact that this portion of the wall had 2 angles, and the fact that it was on a hill meant I had to not only terraform the area to make sure I could have all the levels, but also I had to rework the crenellation design to make sure it would look as even as possible. And the thing is, even with the terraforming, I still couldn't get it to the same levels that I wanted. So I actually had to design a little staircase thing that will allow you to actually get up to the floor, because the tower on the left is actually higher than the tower on the right. Thankfully, I was able to work out some kind of design for the tower, and I was actually able to get them to sit on the same level without having to do any major adjustments. By the way, don't worry about the AFK notifications. That's just because I haven't moved him in a while to change the camera angle. Now, unfortunately, because again, this section of the wall was at an angle, it also rendered one of the windows right here completely useless. Because if you were to look out that window, all you would see is the tower in front of you, the wall to your left, and then with the pillar right here on your right. So you pretty much couldn't see out this window at all. You might as well have not even had it. But I kept it that way because, like I said, I wanted to keep the consistency of the wall going. And finally, it was time for the final portion of the wall, which also gave a little bit of issue. Not as much though, because like I said, this is a straight portion, the other was an angle. Although, this one did give a bit of issue because this one was higher than the others. It meant that the bottom floor of the tower in the walkway was going to be higher than the others, which would mean that in order to make sure you could still walk through this into the main building, I'm going to have to build the main floor higher than I was hoping for in order to match up with the floor of the wall. But thankfully there weren't any real issues with the wall itself, and the fact that I built so much of this freaking wall now that I was able to build this section pretty quick. So now that the walls were done entirely, I came over here and started work on the main building, specifically the front. Now I wanted the entrance to the castle to kind of bulge outward a little bit, to make it a bit more in your face. So I went with a kind of tunnel archway, but I think I made it look a little bit too long. So I'm probably going to have to come back and shorten that. And also, because we're going to have to make the ground floor of the main building taller, to link up with the wall. That means we're also going to have to raise the entrance to the castle up by a couple blocks, but I decided to wait on that till the next part. I then built up the front wall a little bit and then came over to this side of the wall and started building upward to the level of the wall that you can see. Once again, keeping with the theme that I wanted to go for, I went with stone brick and oak wood planks as the flooring. I then built up more of the middle wall here, and then I realized as I started putting the flooring down that the wall on the right side, the one that you can see, and the wall on the left side that's out of camera aren't actually on the same level with each other. Now at first this kind of upset me because that meant that I wasn't going to be able to get them on the same level, and if I wanted to I would have to basically tear down a massive portion of the wall and then rebuild it. But then the difference in height actually gave me an idea. And I ended up deciding to have the section on the left here, the one that's lower, house the main area, the main building, while the area on the right is going to act kind of like a balcony area. Because every castle needs to have some area for us to relax in, am I right? And that's what I decided on. So the lower half is going to house the main buildings, maybe a tower that reaches to the heavens, maybe just some houses for us to stay in, while the left side, the higher edge, is just going to be blank. It's going to be the balcony. Maybe I'll add some furniture there, but for the most part it's just going to hang out in the open. Now one thing I really wanted out of this was because of the fact that there was a mountain on one side and the rest of it was mostly plains with a bit of hilly area. I wanted most of the castle, or at least part of the castle, to kind of dig into the mountain. Kind of like the entrance to Erebor from The Hobbit, if you've seen that movie. Once I finished adding the floor, it was time to add the crenellations, and I ended up having to dig into the mountain a little bit to make sure they were evenly spaced. Once I sorted that out, I came over to the other side and began adding the crenellations for it. Again, repeating the pattern as I had done for the rest of the build. And there we go. The walls for the castle are complete, and this place is really starting to look like a proper castle. Man, is this thing starting to look strong. If any mobs or even other players try to break into this thing, they're gonna get flat out owned. The best part about this is that we even managed to get a head start on the main building of the castle, but obviously we're far from done. We gotta come back, we gotta finish the crenellations, we gotta fix that gateway you'll see there, and we still gotta build the towers up to the heavens. But unfortunately, all that is gonna have to wait until the next episode when we finish the castle entirely. So with all that said, I've been Leuname, and this has been Survival Castle. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and if you did, give it a big thumbs up. If you like what I do, make sure you subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. But until next time, see you guys later. We have not been in this adventure in quite a while. What the frick? The frick was that? Oh! Oh crap! I did not know that there were traps in here. Ow! Okay then.